everybody. So, we're going to talk about being an accidental Team Foundation Server administrator today, or hopefully how to go from being an accidental admin to a relatively competent admin. I don't know why I'm the guy here presenting this, because I'm probably the most accidental person there is. I accidentally joined Microsoft about a year ago. Didn't really mean to, kind of fell into it. We got acquired, and I came and worked for the company. Previous to that, I was the accidental admin. I installed TFS in my company 2 companies ago, and then the company after that. And because I was the guy that installed it, I was the guy that everybody came to, when there was questions. And hey, I can't branch. I've deleted a file I shouldn't have deleted, and when an upgrade needed to be done, I was the guy that was expected to do it, and yet all of a sudden, there was hundreds of developers on this machine. Well, not hundreds, but there's lots of developers on this machine. So we're going to go through. That's me. If you want to get hold of me, feel free to contact me on any of those means, or drop me an email. After this talk, I'm going to go straight down to ask a few questions here, and then we'll head on down to the TFS booth area, downstairs. Has everybody been there already? It's great. There's lots of people there from the TFS team and lots of MVPs and things. So if any more questions that we haven't answered, you've got some burning, how do I do this type of questions, come on down to the booth and we'll try and answer them there as well. Or just drop me an email if you can't get hold of me. As I mentioned, accidentally joined the company when my company got acquired. And I live on my own in Belfast. There's other people in Belfast, but nobody from TFS in Belfast. And just next to where that warship is there, that big hole you see in the ground, sort of above the warship, that's where they built the Titanic. How cool is that? Don't let that worry you. I mean, it was fine when we last touched it. But I also work on Team Foundation Server. That's the other thing that got built out from that location. So, as I say, I'm the only one based in Belfast. Most of the rest of the team is in North Carolina. And then the other half of the team is in Redmond, where the rest of Microsoft is. And then we have developers out in India and some developers in China, some other people dotted around the UK and Europe. And we all connect to the same TFS instance that's in a data center in Building 42, the ultimate answer in Building 42 in Redmond. So, yeah, and we all connect in remotely and, over the VPN. Works great. I co-authored a couple of books, as I mentioned. Luckily, I wrote the chapters such as the source control one and some of the build stuff, and all the admin chapters were actually, oh, there we go, great, thank you. All the admin chapters were written by a guy called Grant Holliday, who is the most non-accidental admin I know. He's the guy that knows the most about TFS in the world, and he helped me put some of his content together as well. So, why are we here? Well, been talking around. Who was the person that installed TFS in their organization here? Okay. Tag, you're it. You're the admin. Who's now the person that administers a TFS instance that somebody else came in and installed? That's even worse, yeah, unlucky you. But yeah, that's a harder position. Who doesn't have anything to do with running their TFS box and is just here, he's just interested? Okay, great. So like I say, I came to TFS. I was lucky to be involved very early in Team Foundation Server, back when it was in early beta in 2000, and well, it was 2004, but the 2005 version of TFS when that was in beta. And this is kind of the basic architecture of a Team Foundation Server instance. You have the clients, so Visual Studio or Eclipse or people in Excel on their PCs. And then that communicates to the application tier, which is an IIS box running a bunch of web services. And then that communicates over SQL down into the data tier, where all the data is stored. All the data in TFS is stored in the database. if you back up the database, you've backed up the data in your TFS instance. Okay? All that stuff, right, and the relational data cubes and reporting services, and then you've also got SharePoint portals, we'll go and cover that in a sec. All that stuff there can actually live on one box. Anyone who was in my demo at the start of the week, on a Windows 7 machine, I had Visual Studio installed, Team Foundation Server, application tier, and the data tier. And the database I was using there was actually SQL Express. So, you know, it can, especially in 2010, it actually can live on a client, and it can be on a 64-bit operating system. So all that works. But it also scales up to crazy architectures, some of which we'll talk about in a second. I'm a developer. I like to know about tin and how things work over ports because it helps me understand a bit more when things go wrong. So the client tier talks to the application tier over just standard HTTP, you know, or HTTPS. By default, it uses port 8080 for if it's a HTTP, but there's no reason why it has to. And actually, now when you install TFS 2010, in the past it was very tricky it was hard work to get TFS to live side by side on port 80 with other stuff. So in 2010, we moved Team Foundation Server under its own virtual directory. So now it's in /TFS on the IIS box. And so you can happily run TFS 2010 on an IIS server with other stuff, like, for instance, its SharePoint portal. Or you could run it on port 443 SSL with SharePoint, with reporting services, with maybe some other applications. And that makes it a lot easier, actually, to access that TFS instance over the internet, because you can just have it on port 443, you just crack open the one port, and in you come. I was chatting to a couple of people who were interested in the Team Foundation Server proxy. Anyone use a TFS proxy? Anyone know what a TFS proxy is? Okay, a few of it, about 50%. So the Team Foundation Server proxy is a server. It actually contains a bit of code that's in the application tier. It was taken originally from the application tier. And what it does, when you ask Team Foundation Server for a file, you know, and files from source control can get quite big. That file is cached both by the application tier and by the TFS proxy server. So when your client, your Visual Studio, says, hey, I would like to get this file, please, it goes to the server, the main application tier, and it says, what version is, you know, what's the latest version of foo.txt? The server says, here's the latest version, and this is the download URL for it. And that's a big download URL, and it's got some encrypted ticket data in there. And then the client then says, fantastic. And it sends that download URL, that download request, to either the application tier, or if it's configured on the client, to the proxy server. And then the proxy requests that from the application tier and then caches it locally. And that's really, I've already mentioned, we're based all over the world, the TFS team. So that was a feature we built for our own convenience. Because when you come in at 9 o'clock in the morning, we work in different time zones. The guys in Redmond have done a bunch of check-ins overnight. I come in 9 o'clock in the morning, I do a get, and I get all the files, and I've got them cached locally. Now, if I was lucky enough to have someone else in my office, which the people in North Carolina happen to do, but if I had somebody else in my office, when they came in and did a get latest, all those versions of those files that the Redmond people had been playing with overnight, they would already be locally. So I would just be able to pull them over my gigabit network straight to my machine. I wouldn't have to wait for them to come all the way over the wire from America. And then there's the build agent. Again, the build agent can live on the same machine as the TFS application tier, but it's the thing that does there's a build controller and a build agent, but I've merged them together on here. The build controller is the thing which controls the builds, and the build agent is the thing that does the builds. You can have multiple build agents, and you can even have multiple build controllers if you want. They're the things that are responsible for doing automated builds if you're using Team Foundation build automation. It sends its results to a drop folder, which is just a Windows file share. Has to be a Windows file share, you know, SMB share. It can't be FTP or HTTP or anything like that. It has to be an SMB share. And it also can talk to what's called a symbol server. Anyone go to the IntelliTrace session yesterday with Mickey? Yeah. As you'll hopefully, if you haven't done it, it was a good session. I recommend you take a look. It shows you a bunch of stuff that you probably have already in Visual Studio and you're just not using, in terms of being able to debug to the correct places in code and capture stuff. The symbol server is a place to publish your symbols. You know those crazy PDB files that you probably always wondered what they are? Go and watch Mickey Gouset's session on the IntelliTrace and you'll understand what a PDB file is for. A symbol server is just a file share that you can publish those to. And then you can also have a database here, and if you want analysis services, so the reporting services, that can be split out onto its own box as well. And then finally the SharePoint portal. Now, in 2005 and 2008, the nightmare about installing TFS, I found, because I didn't work for Team Foundation Server then, was it had to do everything with SharePoint for you. And it kind of had to do everything with a database for you, and it demanded its own database instance, and, you know, it kind of assumed it owned everything. We don't anymore in 2010. We're trying to be, you know, this is V3. We're getting a lot more mature now. And so you can just go to your, DBA and say, hey, can I have a database, please? And you can give that database to TFS as you're installing it, and it'll go create the tables in there. So it tends to just work how you expect it to work. Also, the SharePoint portal. You used to have SharePoint, and you used to have to let it create a team project create a team portal as it was creating a team project, even if you never ever used that SharePoint portal again. Don't have to do that anymore. SharePoint's optional now. So if you don't want to use SharePoint portal technology, or probably what's most likely is you already have infrastructure in your company in place for SharePoint. You know, the SharePoint guys manage SharePoint. We just go request a SharePoint instance from some team and magically appears. Then you can just go point to your SharePoint instance and it just works. Or you can just point to a website. You know, if you've got like a wiki somewhere that you want to use, you don't want to use SharePoint, then you can just go point to that. Okay? Wrong button. There we go. So one of the problems we can suffer from is that we overload the term team and project quite a lot. And so you get team projects, team project collections, team foundation server, projects, solution files, VB projects, you know. It's the same word. What are you talking about? So I just thought we'd clarify some of this. On Team Foundation Server, new in 2010, you have multiple team project collections. A team project collection is, as the name suggests, a collection of team projects. So we'll talk about what team project in a sec is. If you're from 2008 and 2005, what you thought of as TFS is now kind of the team project collection. So you know how, like, change set IDs, they increment across the server? They now increment across the team project collection. The work item IDs are the same. The team project collection is what you had in your head previously as a server. It's a discrete, contained, completely manageable, that is a TFS instance that somebody connects to. It's separated from the other project collections totally. Now in 2010, a team project collection has one SQL database associated with it. So there's a one-to-one relationship between a team project collection and a SQL database, which makes it really easy to make sure you've backed up all the tables in that team project collection consistently, because you just back up the database. Under a team project collection is a team project, which, again, I tend to describe a team project as the scope of a team project is probably bigger than you think. A team project can have multiple teams in it, kinda. Multiple solution files in it, definitely. So you have to. I always think of it about a requirement. You know, if I have a requirement for a system, ideally, like, I know, the shopping cart should allow you to add trainers, yeah? Then every system that that requirement touches should ideally be in that same team project. So if it touches your ASP.NET front end and some middleware system and some, I don't know, some Java system I work on, some of the Java stuff, you know what I mean? All that stuff can be in the same team project. To give you an example, the entire next version of Visual Studio and Team Foundation Server that was talked about at the start of the week, and all 3,500 people working on it, they're in one team project collection on our server. Then again, when I was at Teamprise, the company I was here previous to this, we just had one team project for our company, you know, because we only had one product. So, but in the company I worked previously, which was an insurance company, we had multiple team projects, and it was, you know, like the financial services team or front office and back office, or, you know, it was in teams. Okay. Inside that, you can have branches, and then inside the branch, you have your solutions and your project files. And you can have multiple team project collections now on one TFS instance, and inside of those, you can have multiple team projects. So, who recognizes this? Who has their TFS server installed like this? They've got one box that's got the application tier on it and the SQL database. Okay. That supports, and we'll talk about numbers, but that supports, you know, most normal teams. If you can fit your team on a bus, which is always good, because you're not, you know, if your team's bigger than they can't fit on a bus, you're probably going to get into trouble. So if your team fits on a bus, then that's perfectly fine for you. And that's the most simple TFS configuration, really. That was what was called an ATDT configuration in the old documentation, you know, application tier, data tier on one box. Who recognizes this is how they have it? So a server that's an application tier and a separate server that's a database. Okay. That's very common as well, and that allows you to really scale up to some serious numbers of users. Notice what's new is you can actually, you know, you can support a cluster SQL server, but you can also have, you can also do things like rely on database mirroring. So you could have two database servers with the databases mirrored between them, and then use like a hardware load balancer in front of it, or a switch to do failover. So if one of the database servers go down, you can switch to the other one that it's mirrored to, and everything will be good. So that's all supported now in 2010 because it's much easier to configure. And then you can go crazy and have like huge. Who has a configuration like this? Wow, cool. Yeah, you can have network load balancers here, and it's quite common in hosting companies as well that host Team Foundation Server commercially. They they want separation between, say, the finance department and the HR department, but they're fine for internal systems. But maybe an external one wants to be in a different server because we might have contractors coming into it, so that one might be accessible over the internet. But we don't really want our finance source code and our HR source code. We never want that accessible over the internet. So, yeah, and you can now in 2010 you can have a load balancer in front of your application tiers. You couldn't previously, which is a big scalability issue. So now you can. The application tier is completely stateless. Okay. Who's got a configuration like that? Yeah, it can get crazy. So you fire out your SharePoint, fire out your data warehouse, fire out your virtual machine manager, you've got TFS proxies, build farms, all sorts of stuff. It can get a bit complicated. Try not to, if you can avoid it. I've been in some customers where they show me this huge configuration and they've got like a dev environment, normally banks actually. You know, it's probably before the past years ago and there was a bit more money going around. But you had like a mirrored server and, you know, just to test things, and it was great, but you don't need to go completely hugely scalable. You know, you want to look at what you can support. And for us, for normal people like me, the simpler it is, the better, really, unless you have like professional IT pros on your staff, which I'm lucky enough that I work in a company that does now. So, some numbers for you. This is from, if you haven't seen this, the vs2010quickref.coplex.com. is a bunch of guidance that are provided by the TFS Rangers. They're internal and external people who are experts and a community of experts in Team Foundation Server. and they produce this guidance, some of which I've taken from here. And it gives you some ideas when you're doing capacity planning, what kind of things you need to take into account, that sort of thing. So, but here's like the summary numbers, and basically a normal box can support a normal team. But if you want to go crazy, then you can do it. So, just to give you the system I was an accidental administrator of, so the Teamprise system, that was my second TFS instance. We had 25 users in total, 7 of which were the developers, so we actually use it. The rest were like managers and support people and so on and so forth, and sales staff. It was on a single box, you know, and it was a fairly decent box at the time. We bought it, but it wasn't hugely powerful. And then inside it we had 2 disks in a RAID 1 configuration. Fast disks, though, because you can't beat a nice fast disk to get data off your server. And we did backups to tape. Now, when we did an upgrade, which we did a lot of because we were a beta customer and we used to get a lot of releases early from Microsoft and things, so we needed to do upgrades and stuff all the time. We've upgraded it every single version from 2005 beta 2, every single version all the way up to 2010. When we did an upgrade, we had a backup taken to disk, but we were worried about how long it would take us to restore the backup and everything. So what we always used to do was, when we were doing a backup, we'd come in at the weekend, or it was actually what my colleague would, before he left on Friday, he would pull the disk out of the machine, and then I came in, because I work in the UK, I was in before him. I'd come in, he'd pulled one of the RAID disks out of the machine. I'd do the upgrade. If it all worked, great, we put the disk back in again and let it mirror. If it didn't, we just switched the machine off, swapped the disk back around, and we were back up and running with no interruption. So I'm not saying that's the best way to do it, but it worked for us. Now you guys now are spoiled because virtualization's come on so good in the past few years that you can do VM snapshots and things like that. So it's a lot easier to do that sort of thing. But you can't beat a bit of RAID swapping. We had a build server. The build server was on a separate machine to the TFS application tier. I highly recommend that because the build server does a lot of stuff. It's very CPU intensive, very disk I/O intensive, and you don't want the builds running, and you want builds running all the time because you want to do continuous integration. You don't want those slowing down the performance of checking in and checking out source code. So put your build server on a separate box if you're going to do anything. But another thing with a build server, when you're running some of the advanced testing stuff, it actually injects code, debug code into the assemblies that are running on IIS to get debug information, things like that. Or you can do load testing against IIS. You can really hammer your IIS box, and you don't want that hammering your application tier. So move it off on a separate box. We had one project collection because when we upgraded from TFS 2008 to 2010, it creates a default collection and puts your server into it. So that's how it works. And we had one team project in it called Teamprise, funny enough. A funny name about this server, actually. I'm from the UK. I speak funny, as you might have noticed. And we were in a meeting and we were having the usual developer, well, what should we call the machine? This is the most important thing we've got to do today, decide on the machine name. So this was the machine we were going to use for dog fooding. And so my colleague suggested we called it Alpo, which, they all chuckled about. I didn't get the joke. I have no idea what Alpo is, So they came in Monday morning to find their new server, Aldo, A-L-D-O. I'd completely misheard them. And they were like, that's not funny. I don't know what. So then they chuckled about it, the crazy English guy. And back in the day, in 2005, the only way to recover from that, we actually had to repave the operating system and start from scratch. And it was just easier to make sure we got it right. There were ways of fixing it. We didn't want to mess. We just repaved the box and started again. 2010, I'll show you. You can just go in and change your little field and it all works. So my little thing would have been a bit happier then. Who uses Codeplex? Okay, so Codeplex is the open source hosting solution by Microsoft. They use Team Foundation Server for work items, and then they either use Team Foundation Server or Mercurial for source code, depending on what you pick when you create a new team project. That's a TFS instance that used to be behind Codeplex in 2008. Lots of boxes, because they have 2.5 million users, you know, and lots of team projects. A big old system, lots of, you know, fault tolerant. They upgraded to 2010, and that's what they have now, all virtualized. They have, as I say, it's a mirrored SQL server. That's what they use for redundancy. And they have the two servers that they run. You know, the redundancy is they have 2 VMs running 2 ATs. So two VM hosts running 2 ATs each, and then, you know, they load balance between the 2 ATs, and then they send them down. So, yeah, and, you know, it was a lot cheaper for them. The capacity doubled, the hardware thing, and it's a lot easier. So, inside Microsoft, we use Team Foundation Server inside Microsoft. Not all teams use Team Foundation Server yet inside Microsoft, because we migrate teams over when it makes sense. I ain't going to slow the next Windows version. I'm not going to be responsible for it not shipping, because we were trying to migrate them to TFS at the time. So, you know, all of Developer Division, which is the people who do Visual Studio and Team Foundation Server, we're all on TFS. Other groups are, surprising groups are, like who uses the Bing applications on their iPad or iPhone or whatever, you know. They're all, you know, they're all developing using Team Foundation Server. Who does some of the other things you've used? It's amazing the number of groups we have inside the company. We also have a lot of internal IT projects we use to manage our business, and again, they're all on TFS. So we have 42 instances, 20,000 users, 7.9 million work items. So TFS can get quite big. Fortunately, we don't have many accidental admins. We have proper people that look after these servers for us. So. Okay, these are the kind of tools you'll be familiar with. Let's go play with some. I'm bored talking. So, jump onto my laptop. Okay. So we'll come in here, and the first one you probably are already familiar with is Visual Studio. So, and this is where a lot of the administration functionality is. For instance, once you create a Team Foundation server, the first thing you've got to do here is create a new team project on it. And so that's where you come in, new team project, and, you know, off you go. And you can pick your process template type and that sort of thing. What you can also do in here is actually, if you go down Team Project Collection Settings, you can group membership. We're going to come back to security in a second. But yeah, that's where you manage groups. And you've got things like, you know, if you want to take a new branch of main, you do branching and merging branch. And then we might branch that to releases / v2o or something like that. Hit branch. Yeah, that's great. Whatever. Off it goes. There's a branch. Fantastic. Now then, who has installed the Team Foundation Server Power Tools? Brilliant. Okay, that's great. So you will have already seen such great features as work item templates and team members, but more importantly, the one that everyone always asks for is the Alerts Explorer. Have you used that? So you come in here, and the alert that a lot of people always want is the somebody's checked in with the policy override. So they've checking policies, these pieces of code you can switch on the client, which disable you from checking in until you've met some criteria, like you've added a comment or you've associated with a work item. All those checking policies can be overridden, which alarms people. They're like, I want control of my server, you know. So we do it to stop people allow people to work. What you can do here is you can set up an email alert so that when somebody does a policy override, rather than sending to the administrator, let's send it to whole company, or at Microsoft.com. Please don't send an email to that address. I'll get told off. Yeah. So, and that will stop people from doing unnecessary check-in overrides. You also, who has themselves modified their process templates a little to add fields and things? Okay. So you probably, who uses, of those people, who uses the Notepad? Who uses the Power Tools? Hey. One uses the Power Tools. It makes it a little bit easier, and we'll quickly show you. So the process template, so let's just quickly show you actually. If we go to Team, And we do team project collection settings, process template manager. These are the process templates I have installed on this server. This is actually, this virtual machine I'm playing with is the same virtual machine image you can download from Microsoft, the standard, all-up machine image. I wanted to bring that one down so you could play with it yourselves later if you needed to. So I've got a few process templates installed on here. Here's the Agile one. I can download the process template, so I'll download that to my desktop. Add new folder, Agile, select folder. There's it downloaded, and then I'll come in. And if I actually look on my desktop now, see there's the Agile folder. The process template is the thing which controls what happens when you create a new team project. And it's got everything in. It's got what build templates should be there, what groups and permissions should be initially set up. But it also has the work item tracking, and which work item type should be configured. So we'll go and we'll edit a work item type, but the advantage is you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it on a new team project. You can also do it to a project in flight. So let's look at this one here, which is work items, and we can see if I do a new bug, that's the bug form. Now this is completely customizable. So for instance, title's mandatory, and then assigned to is blank by default. And if we look in, it's got a bunch of names here. But notice it's by default got a bunch of these sort of funny names in here, like local service and network service and TFS reports. And what's that all about? Maybe you don't want them. Maybe you want it so when you create a new bug, it's assigned to unassigned. And yeah. So, and currently won't even let me do that because unassigned is not a supported value because it's not one of those names. So how would we fix this? What we want to do is we could export and import from the command line if we wanted. So you could go in, the old-fashioned way is to use a command called, wit admin it is now, and you can import import witdd, export witd, import wit definition, export wit definition. You can do that. To get wit admin, by the way, you need to if you fire up a Visual Studio command prompt, that's the easiest way. So I could import and export work item definitions. Notice from here, here's a good one, destroy work item. That's just in the command line because we don't want everyone doing that. But if somebody created a work item that they weren't supposed to, maybe it's got, and they never want it appearing in the audit history. They never want the data there. Maybe it's got some personally identifiable data in it. You want to make sure it's destroyed. You can use the command line to destroy that work item and it'll be like it never existed. There'll be a gap in your work item numbers, but it'll be like it never existed. And it'll go back and actually delete that row from the table and delete the storage, but it does that afterwards. Takes a few minutes. But if I do like wit admin help, I can't spell, destroy work item, and it'll give me the help and tell you what to do. So let's wit admin. Oops. Let's come in and we could do import export. I can't be bothered with that. That's too hard because I don't do this every day. So I come in here and I go tools, process editor because I've installed the Power Tools. Tools, process editor, work item types, and I'll export wit. So I'm exporting it from the server to my machine. I'm going to come in, default collection, I'm going to pick from my team project the bug, and I'm going to drop it into work item templates, my team project, and I'm going to drop it there, bug XML. I'm going to say no for now, talk about it in a sec. So that's the bug, and then if I actually go and open bug XML, I've gone to this in Notepad, because I might as well show you what it looks like. So work item templates, my team project, bug XML. We see here is a work item type definition, Work item name is bug, or a bunch of fields, a bunch of stuff, how it should be laid out, a bunch of rules, lots of XML, groovy. Or you could come in here and you go tools, process editor, work item types, open work item type from file. Let's open the bug. Oops, sorry, hang on a second, let's just close that. Tools, process editor, work item types, open from file, bug. And there we go. It's opening up the work item type now, and we've got like an editor and stuff. Editor's quite cool. It allows us to do some fields, but it also allows us, look at that. Anyone wanting to understand how their work item workflows are, just come in here and dump that and take that screenshot out and give it to somebody. And then it explains the various state transitions and the various states in a work item. This is the form layout. This is how it's defined in XML. Click on Preview Form, and it will render a version of the form for you. This is a preview. It's not 100% accurate, but it does a good job at previewing it. So I might want to come in, and for instance, let's play with that. We'll do a couple of things. We'll add a new field called, we'll call it customer name or something like customer. We modified our bug at Team Prize to have a customer in it because we wanted to track bugs per customer, but we also wanted to have our biggest customers in, so we didn't have to type the name wrong and we'd be able to find them. So there's customer, and reference name is the actual field name. This has to be unique across the team project collection. This actually gets added as a column in a table under the hood. So it has to be unique. So we'll say com foobar, and we'll call it customer or something like that, and some help text, and we'll give it some rules. So we'll say, we'll give it some suggested values, for example, and we'll say some customer names, so Microsoft, the classics, Contoso, whatever. Okay, there we are. That'll do me. So that's the field, and then I want to add it into my form. So I'll come into here, and I'll look at my preview, and then where's a good space? Well, heck, under here, under classification, that's a good enough space. I'll stick it there. So I'll come in, find classification, and I'll say, yeah, I'll stick it in that column. That'll do. Let's just add a new control, and I'll say customer. Field control, and then I've lost it. The name. Okay. Sorry? Yeah, I'm trying to. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Yeah, and this is where you got the. There we go. You start typing in here, and if you do a drop down, you notice you're the ones at the top because you've uniquely qualified it. Notice I called it com foobar customer or foobar customer rather than just customer, and that's to help you make sure it's unique. All the ones that come out of the box are Microsoft ones. So, thank you, sir. So that's that, and then if I could save it, and then if I hit preview form, we can see it's there, but notice it doesn't have a drop down. That's a bit odd. That's because it's just a preview. It's not actually 100% accurate, this power tool. And so if I come in here and I'll go tools, process template, edit process editor, export width. Sorry, that's wrong. Tools, process template, I always get it wrong around. Process template editor. Work item types, import width. So you're now importing it into the server. Even though it's going off your machine, you're importing. Makes a lot of sense, but hey, it's a power tool. Hasn't been for usability study yet. So we'll come in here and we'll do bug. Yeah, okay. Import it. Hopefully. Wake up. There we go. And I come in now and right click and do new bug. And notice we've got the customer field, and it's got a drop down if I start typing suggested values. Brilliant. So there we go. I'll not do too much more in process template customization, as a lot of you have done it already, but I personally recommend you do it on the files rather than doing it live on the server. I also recommend that you play with a virtual machine image, because as I mentioned, when you add a new field, that actually adds a column in a table. That column stays there if you delete the field again. You have a limit of about 1,000 custom fields. So, if you decide to change the name of the ID, then you can run out of space. So you want to practice on a virtual machine before you then disrupt the team and make sure everything's working. Okay. Some other quick tools I wanted to show were, sorry, just having a quick time check, was the, we've got a bunch of power tools. We've got some command line tools. Here's a good one for you. So TF, the command line tool. TF help, you've got a bunch of command lines here. Have you ever had somebody come in and say, oh, I've just checked something in and I didn't mean to? What do I do? Well, in 2010, we have the rollback command. TF help rollback. So from the command line, you can roll back a change set. There we go. you can actually get them to do that because it's their change set. So say TF rollback. TF destroy is another one if they've checked something in they shouldn't have done. TF destroy, oops, he helps if I spell correctly. Destroy. Actually can delete and can keep the history but delete the file, if you know what I mean. So you can see the history entries there and it get rid of the binary file. If it's just because it was big, you want to get rid of it. Or you can delete it completely and it was never there. What happens if somebody deletes something and then can't find it again? So you come in here and you maybe delete tailspin.model or something like that. I have no idea how big that is, but it feels quite big. And you just let me check in this delete. So other windows, pending changes. Yep, there we go. Check in. Continue to check in one item. Yes. Yay. Oh, rubbish. I didn't mean to delete that. What do I do now? Source control. Well, you know, if you can't undelete, then that would be a pretty hard thing, but it's actually quite well hidden. So if you come in here, Source Control Explorer, Team Foundation Server, show deleted items in Source Control Explorer. Check that. So let me show you. There you go, show deleted items. OK. And then now, look, there's the deleted item. So now you can right-click on it and say undelete. Yay. So, and then if you view a history on here, view history, you can actually see. There you go. There's my yay. So, okay. There's a couple of new commands that came in. If you go on your actual applications here, if you go into Team Foundation Server, I can't type. There we go. There's a bunch of commands in the Tools folder. Command line tools, for instance, and you can see here, look, there's SharePoint.exe, which is quite big, and SQLExpress.exe. So if you try and do a new project collection and you just want to do a basic configuration, it can actually install SharePoint. Well, it can install SQL Express for you, and if you want it to get it to install the SharePoint bits, it can do all that stuff for you as well. It can just do it, but you can, you know, by default, you can point it to one that already exists if you want to. So. But the one I wanted to show you was, look at this. Nobody write this down. TFS config license. Anyone had a trial instance of TFS, and then it ran out one day, and everyone couldn't stop working? Everyone's forgotten that they were on a trial. If you do TF config license, it'll tell you what the license is on the server and how long it's got left to run. If another one, if you're taking a backup of a server and putting it into a virtual machine because you want to play, like an upgrade or something, remember this command. If you leave and only remember one thing today, remember the command, change server ID. Oops, and if you spell it correctly, change server ID. And actually, there's a bunch of IDs, there's a bunch of GUIDs inside of the database that uniquely identifies TFS, because now we have these friendly names. It uniquely identifies it. If you just take a copy of the database and put it over, it still thinks it's the same instance of TFS. So if you come in and you just say change server ID, it'll give it a new GUID, and then other clients connecting to it know it's a different instance. So otherwise you might be on your backup thinking, and this has happened, you know, I might have accidentally done it, coming in on the server and think, oh, I'm just doing a test in the upgrade, oh yeah, this is great, brilliant, oh, rubbish, oh well. Oh, at least it didn't affect anyone, and then get a phone call when the Americans woke up and was like, why has our machine stopped working? Because it was talking to the live one rather than the backup. I once knew somebody who accidentally used to work for a phone company, and they accidentally were working on the production system rather than the main system, and cut off someone rather important who was the Queen. So yeah, don't be doing that. Okay. Right then, and then there's a bunch of other little things here. So I'll just show you some stuff, just so you know where to look. We're going to come into these SQL Management Studio. Down, who's read the help for the install guide help before? A couple of people? Yeah, okay. The one caveat to remember that always calls me out is make sure you hit unblock on the file. So right-click Properties, unblock, before you then double-click on it. If you download the latest version from the internet, which I always recommend you do. And there's a bunch of good stuff in here. Of course, you could read Professional Team Foundation Server 2010 at all good bookshops, but you could just read the help if you want. Best Practice Analyzer. Anyone use that? That's in the Power Tools? A few less. It's quite good. It'll actually go and configure, it'll go and look at your server. The story behind this is it's written by our support team, the TFS support team. If you call TFS support and you got a problem, rather than saying switch it off and switch it back on again, the first thing they do is actually get you to run something. And that's sort of a command line version of all the rules that are in here. And it goes and it does a bunch of rule checking and just checks for common misconfiguration problems. And then they were like, hey, why don't we just make this available to everyone so we don't actually have to call support before they get all this good knowledge base of information? So that's what we did. They built a UI around it for us. And you can come in and you can start a scan. So start a scan and you can do a complete health check. Or you can do a build health check or whatever. Just go hit scanning it, start scanning, and off it can run. You can even run this as a scheduled task. So you, as part of the scan process, you can specify an email address when you're doing a new one, and go in and I'm going to hit stop scanning because we've got 10 minutes. Go in and get it to run it as a scheduled task and send you an email, so you can have it running once a month or something like that. Make sure something's not broke. And that's good if you share the administration duties with multiple people on your in your instance. They might go in and change stuff and not tell you about it and break it. So. Not that anyone's done that to you, obviously, as I can tell by the nods. Yeah. Okay. And then there's a TFS administration tool. We're going to show that in a second. Backup Restore Wizard. Well, we're going to come back to that. Power Tools. Just quickly in here, TFPT. This is the Power Tool command line that gets installed. And one gentleman had the question where they'd installed the Scrum process template before they had a SharePoint portal. And so then when it came to doing the SharePoint portal, the portal didn't have all the fancy Scrum stuff. How do we fix that? New in the latest version of the Power Tools, TFPT add project portal. You can just go in and add it after the fact. TFPT add project report. So you can go and add those after the fact as well. And the reports one's actually handy. It can be handy in some upgrade scenarios because you might want to go. It upgraded your existing reports, but then you go and look at a project collection that was created brand new after you did an upgrade, and there's a bunch of shiny new reports which you don't see, and maybe you want those rather than the ones you've got. You can just go and get those if you want to. There's some other things there. It's worth poking around, having a look. Okay. That one. There we go. So, administration tools. Some tips. If you're doing an install and upgrade, if you can get a clean machine to do it on, fantastic. That's great. Equally, if you're going from 2008 to 2010, you don't have to, but you get less problems. If you're going from 2008 to 2010, then it's really cool if you can use that opportunity to get some new hardware, maybe, and get a 64-bit capable machine, because TFS 2008 couldn't install on a 64-bit OS. It now can in 2010. So maybe you could get a new machine, install it on a 64-bit OS, maybe Windows Server R2, so you can use SQL Server 2008 R2 and be all the way up to date. As you're doing an upgrade anyway, why not get all the way up to date, and then that hardware and software spec will last you for a few more upgrades. Use VMs to practice, but as I mentioned, when you're imaging TFS instances and you have two live at the same time, make sure you do the change server ID. Otherwise, it could cause you problems, speaking from experience. You only now need to configure reporting in SharePoint if you actually need them. You can do an instance without them. So if you just want it for source control and for work item tracking and for builds, you don't need them. So, make your life simple, don't install them, and, you don't have to install them is what I'm trying to say. You get there's lots of value add, obviously, in reporting on top of it, but you don't need it. Before you run the upgrade, run the business process analyzer, the best practice analyzer, to make sure that your TFS server is in a good and healthy condition. The upgrade does a lot more health checks now than it used to, so you don't get halfway through your upgrade and it says, oh, sorry. But it's good to run the BPA beforehand and just make sure everything's in top health. And then, if you do upgrade your server, which you can upgrade your server first rather than upgrading your clients, you can have the server on TFS 2010 before everybody's on Visual Studio 2010. But to do that, you need to make sure the clients have all got a patch installed which allows 2005 to talk and 2008 to talk to 2010. If you go to tinyurl TFS compat matrix, it'll show you what features are and are not available between different versions and show you how to install the patch and things like that. These slides are all downloadable on the Decade site, by the way. So I'm going to show you a bunch of tiny URLs in a bit, and the idea of that is for future reading, here's a bunch of tiny URLs for you. Once you've upgraded from 2008 to 2010, what it does is it upgrades your process template and moves it over into a new one. But as you've seen, it's very easy to customize the process template. It doesn't actually change your process template any to put you to the latest version of the process template that we ship in the box for TFS 2010. It leaves you with the process template you had back in 2008. If you want the shiny new features, then you have to go in and do some steps. I think there, which is, update basically the work item templates and do some stuff like adding in the new reports and things. And again, TFS upgrade if you want to follow those instructions. It's not frightfully interesting to watch, especially as you saw how quick I am at work item customization. Okay, hardware configurations. Right. When we're managing users, personally, if you've got more than 3 or 4 users, I find, how you've got the Team Foundation server, you've got SharePoint, and you've got reporting services, and you have to keep those users in sync. Yeah? Are you aware of this problem? And if you don't, then you get the little red cross in Team Explorer. Have you seen the red cross? Okay, because you forgot to give somebody permission. What I like to do is I create, again, this isn't a simple config that we had at TeamPrise. We had server admins, we had project admins, project contributors, and project readers. And we just had 3 Active Directory groups. So TeamPrise admin, TeamPrise contrib, TeamPrise read. And then we added those groups into the various places in TFS. So we added the project, to all the groups in the Team Foundation server itself, but we also added them into SharePoint and into reporting services. And that way, when somebody new came on the team, we just had to remember to add them to one Active Directory group, and their access permissions were sorted everywhere, including file shares and everything. So that's the way I personally recommend doing it. You can, on top of that, if you want to, also add people individually and give them additional allow or deny permissions, if you really wanted very fine level control. But it's best to do it with Active Directory groups in an organization of any size. As a matter of interest, who has a process internally already for adding somebody to an Active Directory group? They just send an email or go to a website or something. Yeah, it's quite common in all the big companies I work for. That's quite common, but it wasn't in TeamPrise, so I just did it myself. So let's have a quick look at users and permissions. So there's a bunch of, as we say, there's a bunch of places where you can configure users and permissions. There's TFS itself, which is down in here. If you right-click on the team project, so team project settings, you see group membership. Go in here, and then look, you've got a bunch of, there's those contributors, admins, and readers roles. And then if you go into here, you might say properties, and then you can see it's currently got demo users grouping and Abuobi and me. So yeah, and that's how it's configured. That's how it's configured when you download the stuff. That's how Tailspin Toys is configured. You can go in here and add the users again individually, just there. Once you do that, you also have to remember to go to the project portal. So you browse to your project portal, and while that's connecting, I'm also going to browse to the reporting server. And you have to go add them into the site, add them into there to SharePoint, and go to the project server and add them into there. So I'm going to wait for that to do it. Or another way is you could use, there's a tool called, which is from Coplex, TFS Administration Tool. And you can come in here, and I actually did it manually a lot of the time, because I found the TFS, this is an open source project run by a great group of guys, but because it comes out, it tends to lag behind a little the server versions, so as I was always on the latest versions, it took a while to come out, and so I just did it manually. But you come in here and say My Team Project, double click on there, I can go add users, and we can look, it's highlighting some problems for us. It's saying this demo users group isn't actually in SharePoint or reporting services. So I could come in here and I could say, you know, what SharePoint roles do I want contributors to have? Well, I like them to have contribute access, and it's suggesting which access to give them. Browser, hit OK. Job's good. And then you'd hit commit changes, and it makes those changes to reporting services into SharePoint for you. Pretty neat. Okay. And then also, a question I got asked at the booth a couple of times today was, what if I don't want people checking into my branch? I've got this branch that's production. I don't want people checking in. What you can do is you can come in here, and then you properties, and you can actually change the permissions. Okay? So you can come in and you can say, where are we? Project contributors, because you're in administrators normally. Project contributors, I'll uncheck inherit security settings, and I will not give them check-in permission. They can do everything else. In fact, I'll give them check-in permission. I'll let them check out. But I'll not let them check in. And so that way, they now cannot check into that branch. That's great. Who's on 2008 or 2005 still? Quite a few. A little warning for you, again, from experience. When you uncheck that inherit security settings box in 2008 and 2010, you notice all the checkboxes are here. I uncheck it, they're still checked. In 2008 and 2005, it unchecked all the boxes for you in all the fields, including project administrators. And so I once went in, removed read access for the contributors. I went into, removed checkout access and did it. Unknowing to me, it removed all the permissions from project administrators, including read. Those of you who know a bit about TFS are already laughing, because, you know, if you can't read a folder, as far as you're concerned, that folder doesn't exist. And so I couldn't then go back in and right-click on it and give myself permissions anymore. I was like, ah! And I had one of those, you know, I'm going to get fired moments. Luckily, the workaround is, if that happens, if you log on to the application tier, as somebody who is an administrator, a machine administrator on that machine, connecting to the application tier, it lets you see every file, even if you don't have read permissions to it. So you can go fix it. But it took me a while to figure that out. Luckily, I blogged it. So yeah, that was not a good day. Okay. Backups. Who knows that their TFS server is being backed up? Great. It was our first TFS instance. The database was owned by this other team, and we kind of said, can we have a database? And they gave us a database. We thought, brilliant. And, you know, for a database team, surely they were doing backups. Well, apparently not. When I moved to TeamPrice, we were doing backups, because I'd had the experience already. However, we were just backing up the tables. We weren't taking machine images. And so we thought, well, if it ever happens, it's never going to happen. Hard drives never fail, do they? It's never going to happen. If it fails, then we'll just install everything again and put the tables in. You know, what did we call this machine? Was it Aldo or Alpo? I can't quite remember what we stuck with. You know, what was the password? What was the reporting services encryption key? Where did we store that file? What versions of stuff? What were the product keys? Make sure you've got a good backup plan. But don't go crazy. Understand what the cost of downtime is. At TeamPrice, again, Microsoft backup, you know, every 15 minutes, I think. I'm not even sure. It's just backed up a lot. Actually, I should probably check it's been backed up, shouldn't I? I'm assuming it is. I know it is. What's the cost of downtime? You know, we decided that, you know what, a day's production of 5, 6, 7 developers, we could probably live with that for the simplicity of doing full backups every day, so that when we want to do a restore, we're just going to restore straight from a full backup. We don't have to do incremental restores after that. So we just went for backup once a day, and then once a week we would take the tapes off-site and go stick them in a safe in the bank. So it was pretty simple, but it did us. Make sure you know who's doing the backups. Make sure you know the phone number of the person that people need to call if you're on holiday in Hawaii and they need to do a restore, because you don't want to get on the plane to come back home. And make sure you practice your backup plan. Other people who've backed up, be honest now, who's ever tried a restore? That's good. Try a restore into a virtual machine and then do a change server collection ID before you connect to it and do anything damaging to it. Because only when you do the restore do you realize what you forgot. Okay, the crown jewels, if you're only going to back up one thing, the thing you must remember to back up is the configuration database that stores all the configuration TFS and the collection databases. Everything else can be rebuilt from those two, including the data warehouse. You can rebuild the data warehouse. But as long as you've got those two safe, they're the ones you want to keep most up to date as well. If you're going to do incremental backups every 15 minutes, those are the things you need to do incremental backups of. Everything else, that can, you don't need to have as much worry about that. You can do that once a week. I put on this slide a bunch of stuff, a checklist for you of things to make sure I've got. Refer to that in the download. It's a bunch of stuff. Okay, and then quickly, the laptop one. Oops, nope, laptop one. There we go. In the Power Tools, in the September release, and then this most recently in the March release, we've done a lot of work to add a new node to the admin console. Wow, this is the admin console, which you're all probably familiar with now, which is where you can change a bunch of IDs, and you also come here and change the email alert settings, and go look at the server versions and things like that. This is running the RTM version. But you can come in here and you can do backups now. And you can recreate the backup plan. I've already got one set up because even though it's my VM, I mess on it a lot. I like to have backups as well as snapshots. So you come in here, go through, tell you where you want to drop the backups. Usually don't drop it to localhost, That's probably don't want it on the same machine. Where you want it, what you want to do. And this will do all that hard stuff. I'm not going to bother with encryption key now. But this will do all the hard stuff as to make it got SharePoint backed up. And this is really useful for accidental admins like myself, who know a tiny bit about SQL, but just enough to be dangerous, And then it's also better than that. It's got a restore wizard, which comes in handy too. So, but still practice. Okay. Some further reading for you, some light reading, of course. And that's basically, there is a chapter in the book, but I didn't want you to have to buy the book. So that's where all the stuff from the chapter in the book came from, as well as Grant's knowledge. So, okay. And then finally, we use TFS a lot in Microsoft. We use it for thousands and thousands of users. It's pretty mature now in terms of, the feature set. It gets very well hammered in real-world use from us as well as a lot of customers we have. So typically, if your users are complaining about performance, there's a I'm not saying it's not our fault. It could well be. But usually, and the support people tell me, it's usually something in, is like a hardware configuration issue, or there's a network configuration issue, or the disks. We once in Microsoft had our... we store everything on a big SAN. We've got a huge amount of data. One day, it just got really slow, and we're trying to check in, and it's taking like 10 minutes or something stupid. I'm like, what is going on? Ah! You've got 3,000 developers. They soon complain. And it turned out that we'd had a firmware upgrade to our SAN that had reset some settings, and so the disk throughput had gone really low, and so the SQL Server just couldn't get to the disk. The access time was really slow, and that was the bottleneck. So things like that can happen. Our support guys are very, feel free to give them a call if you got support time. They're experts at helping you figure out where the problem is. They're very good guys. They're professional admins, unlike me. And then network is also not a common problem. Maybe you haven't got a network. Often what happens actually is people sometimes are proxying their connections internally when actually they should be going directly to the server. Okay? So quickly, I wanted to show you some hardcore SQL stuff actually under the covers as to what you can do to go and look at some of the performance that's happening. So again, this scares me as much as it scares you, so we'll go in and we'll see how it goes. But let's have a look. So the way TFS works, as we mentioned, while I do this, I'll caveat this with, Feel free to go and have a poke about, looking how things work. I'm a developer. If I don't understand how it works, then I don't really like it. You know, I quite like to know how things work. But also, if your TFS table, your TFS database, is owned by a DBA in your company, any DBAs here? Okay. The rest of us know what DBAs can be like. They like to own their databases and may manage them with an iron fist, and quite right too with customer data. However, sometimes if people are complaining about performance problems, the temptation is to go stick an index on a table or something like that because it make it better. Try not to do that. And try not to like add tables and delete tables and things because that can cause problems. So it happens. So yeah, TFS configuration. Let's go into the default collection. Actually, I'm going to open a bunch of queries I prepared earlier. So one of the things I wanted to show you was this table command table. The TBL command is actually a TBL command. Okay, TBL command is we store on like every 30 seconds the logs in TFS get flushed and put into this table. And then this table's sort of kept to a rolling size. So you can go and see what's been happening in TFS. You can change how long data is kept in this table as well if you're finding it's getting big. But by default, it's there. And so if I come in here and do a quick select star on it with no lock, remember? I may be an amateur, but I'm not that much of an amateur. So I'll hit with no lock, and then we'll come in here, and we'll see that's what's been happening in my TFS instance. So we can see the job agent's been running and a bunch of stuff from a bunch of different people. And you notice some of the fields we have things like the identity name, we have the IP address, we have the start time of the request. There's a bunch of information here. All very well and good, but that doesn't, I want to try and understand a bit of it now. So I can come in here and I can say where it's by me, and I can kind of relate that to stuff I've been doing. So we can see I've been doing a query workspace, I've been getting some IDs, and where have I been doing that from? Well, here on my user agent field, I can actually see, oh, look, that was doing it from some common provider service. That's the shell extensions. You know the Windows shell extensions? That works over COM. So there's the COM provider service. Excel.exe. I was using it in Excel. Whenever you write a tool that uses the TFS API, it sticks in the user agent the process name that's connecting to it. And so you can tell if somebody's written some crazy tool which is hammering your TFS server, you can go find them and nail them. Team Explorer everywhere, because I work on that, so that's the clips. And you can also see here versions as well, look. So that's me running, see that 40219? That's Service Pack 1. Whereas if I scroll down a bit down here, so I was running on a machine, 40219, oh, I can't find it now. 3 whatever I showed you earlier was actually the RTM release. So you can see, you can actually go in here and check if people have upgraded or not to the latest client version. So for example, active clients, we can go in here, we can run a quick query, we can see which clients have connected to our TFS server in the past 7 days, and we can go and we can say, hey, send out an email because look, we've got some people who are still running the RTM and we want them upgrading to Service Pack 1, for example. Okay, we can see people using the sidekicks, which is good. I'll quickly show you that too. And then in here, we can do, if we can try and find out, if we're trying to find out performance, we can go look at, the commands, and we see which ones are running the slowest. So the job agent is running slow, build, so that's fine. Query labels is running slow. Doing the label is actually quite slow in a build process to try and find out what's changed between builds, but nothing there is too bad. And then finally, you can see who's actually been using your TFS server. So we can come in here and we can go see who's been using TFS inside the company, because you want to maybe send them an email to tell them that TFS is going to go down for an upgrade. That's how you do that. What we actually do is make sure they're doing something on it. Like, they've not just been querying, but make sure they're going to notice. So we look at those sorts of commands and come in here, and actually those are the people. So, okay. One other thing I quickly wanted to show you, a power tool, which I'd not shown, was the sidekicks. Who uses the sidekicks from Matrice? Good. They're a third party. You remember I showed you the command line? And look, command line, crazy, lots of tools. From the command line, if a user leaves the company, for example, gets fired, and leaves a bunch of stuff checked out, how do you recover from that? Well, what you'd have to do from the command line is you'd go into You go into here, you do a TF workspaces, and go see what workspaces you had, or TF status, and go see what they had checked out, and then go delete the workspace so that it would remove the checkout. I can't remember that. Even I have to do TF help workspace every time, and I've written the command line client for TFS, like the cross-platform one. So what I do is I come into the sidekicks from Matrice, and I say, the user that got fired, probably me when they find out how incompetent I am, let's come in here and, Martin Woodward, yeah. Let's, from 2009, let's go see what they have checked out. So I actually have all these files checked out here. I actually have them, if you look, I've got them checked out from different machines. I've got one checked out from Ubuntu. I've got a couple here checked out from my laptop, the actual, the host operating system. And so what I could do is I could do a couple of things. I could right-click on here and, let's see, let's go in. If we look, they're in workspace, a few different workspaces, that's right. So I can now go on to the workspace sidekick, and I can come in here and I can say, owner name of Martin on any machine from last accessed in the past year, search. And these are a bunch of workspaces that I have. And I can come in here and I can hit delete, and I can actually delete the workspaces, and that'll remove the checkouts I had in those files, and that'll clear up, and now people can check in. Alternatively, what's another good top tip? Those workspaces take up a bit of space. So one thing that happens inside Microsoft is, 2010, no, actually, 2011, there we go. So I might come in here and go see, let's just use the calendar, that would be easier, wouldn't it? There we go. Let's go see which workspaces haven't been used in the past month. So let's go to April. A month's probably not long enough, but which workspaces are old on my machine and not being used anymore? This one was last accessed on, now when I'm in American, I'm in American format. So that was accessed on the 28th of January. I've got one working folder there. I could just come in here and just delete that. That's obviously not getting used anymore. In fact, this Mibuntu, that's an old virtual machine I don't have anymore, so I'm just going to go delete that workspace and get rid of it. So they're cool, and saves you learning all the command line syntax. Another one that's quite handy actually is a history sidekick, and you can come in here and look at some different properties, and it gives you all the, it gives you a bit more detail on history and branches and merges and labels and things like that. So have a play with the, if you don't have them installed already, the sidekicks from Matrice. Okay. So, lots of different things there, jumped around a bit. The calls to action, make sure you're taking backups. Make sure somebody's taking backups. Have a look at your configuration with the best practice analyzer, and then if people are complaining about performance, there is something wrong. TFS should not be slow. Promise me. I promise you, rather. Promise me it shouldn't be slow as well, because then they'll be happy customers. So, yeah. So if users are complaining, then listen to them. They're not making it up. But try and find evidence to back it up as well. You get the general, it's slow, it's slow, it's slow. And you actually find that one request was slow and the rest of them completed within a millisecond. So maybe they're just being grumpy that day. And then the configuration of your hardware in SQL is the #1 suspect. And don't mess with the schema too much. You can read it, but don't ever change it. Okay, thank you for your time. Also wanted to thank the people that helped me become less of an accidental admin and more of a real admin. So thanks to those guys. There's how to get hold of me. And here's the sessions. You've got access to those. Please don't forget to fill out evals. I know you've been reminded 100 times already, but it's the last day and everyone forgets on the last day. So if you can, that'd be much appreciated. Thank you very much.